There are crimes so strange, so deeply unsettling, they feel like something ripped straight out of a nightmare. Victims vanish without a trace. Clues lead nowhere. And the deeper investigators dig, the darker the answers seem to get, if there are any answers at all. These aren't just cold cases. They're warnings, echoes of something that doesn't want to be found. These are 5 unsolved crimes so bizarre, they seem like horror stories. The Glass Lake vanishing. Glass Lake, a hidden expanse nestled in the thick pine woods of Dunsmuir, Oregon, shimmered like obsidian under the overcast skies of late summer. Known for its crystal waters and unnatural stillness, it drew only the occasional camper or kayaker looking to escape the hum of modern life. In 1982, it became the center of a mystery that has since haunted locals and investigators alike, the unexplained disappearance of 24-year-old Melissa Crowley. Melissa was a passionate environmentalist, soft-spoken yet fiercely independent. She had recently graduated with a degree in ecology and spent most of her time hiking, birdwatching, and documenting remote wildlife locations. Her final project involved cataloging algae growth and pollution levels in isolated lakes across Oregon. Glass Lake was to be her last stop. She arrived on August 15, according to receipts found later in her car parked near the trailhead, trail snacks, a map, and 2 rolls of film. Weather reports indicated a storm brewing for the 17th, but Melissa was experienced in wilderness conditions and had notified her sister she'd return by the 18th. When she didn't, a search team was dispatched. Her campsite was discovered intact, tent zipped shut, food untouched, and her journal neatly stacked with field notes. Her kayak was spotted the next day, slowly circling the lake's far side, seemingly caught in a lazy current. A camera lay inside it, dry, miraculously undamaged. The film was developed immediately. The last 4 photos were what disturbed investigators most. They showed Melissa on the shore at dusk, looking over her shoulder. Her expression shifted across the frames, curiosity, then worry, and finally sheer terror. The final image was taken from the water, unfocused, a blurry figure standing at the tree line behind her, pale, indistinct, and motionless. Audio was found on a small handheld recorder, filled mostly with bird calls and gentle paddling. But at the 28-minute mark, Melissa is heard breathing heavily. She whispers, "I think they're here. I think they're watching me." The tape ends with a loud splash, then silence. Despite days of sonar scans and dive teams scouring the lake, her body was never recovered. No footprints were found besides her own. Wildlife was minimal. No signs of bears, cougars, or large birds. Her disappearance became a cold case, archived under undetermined. In 2006, 24 years later to the day, a father and son hiking the ridge on the lake's north side stumbled upon something buried shallow beneath a twisted pine tree. A water-damaged backpack, wrapped in a rain poncho, was unearthed. Inside were Melissa's field journal, pages warped but legible, and a bundle of drawings made in charcoal and pencil. The images were frantic, harshly shaded. A black mass looming over the lake. Dozens of unblinking eyes watching from tree hollows. And the same figure seen in her final photo, now clearer, with hollowed-out eyes and a too long smile. The final page of the journal read only, "It watches from the water." Despite reopening the investigation, nothing new was discovered. Locals began avoiding the lake entirely. Rumors spread quickly, whispers of an ancient ritual site hidden under the lake's surface, of drowned bodies feeding something older than the forest itself. An elderly woman, a retired teacher, came forward in 2009 claiming that in the 1950s, 4 children went missing near that same lake and were never found. Her memory was shaky, and no official reports could be confirmed. Still, hikers continued reporting odd sights near Glass Lake. Standing figures glimpsed through trees, sudden drops in temperature, the sound of splashing with no visible source. Several claimed to hear whispers just before waking in their tents. One even recorded it, low, wet syllables repeating, "She never left." Despite the legend, no further physical evidence has ever been found. Melissa's family, though long resigned, still maintains a website with her field notes and photos. A page titled, "The Watcher of Glass Lake," collects anonymous tips, many written in shaky, frantic handwriting. In 2021, a drone video surfaced on a conspiracy forum. It showed a slow aerial pass over Glass Lake. At the 4:02 timestamp, just near the water's edge, a figure stands staring up at the camera. White clothing. Motionless. Blurred but unmistakable. When the drone returns in a second past 30 seconds later, the figure is gone. A user commented beneath, "It's always standing there until it knows you see it." Melissa Crowley's case remains unsolved. Her body was never found. Her voice, captured in those final recordings, is all that remains. Calm, afraid, whispering of something impossible. The Winter Park murmurs. The woods surrounding Winter Park, Minnesota, stretch for miles. Dense, frostbitten, and unforgiving. The air there always seems a bit too still, even in the wind. Locals call it the frozen breath, a patch of forest where sound doesn't travel right. On February 13, 1997, 4 high school seniors disappeared into those trees and were never seen again. The case was dubbed the Winter Park Murmurs, after strange voicemails surfaced in the days that followed. Their names were Eric Talbot, Marie Lynn, Josh Emmerich, and Kelsey Dover. All were popular, athletic, and deeply connected in their small community. That Friday night, the group told their parents they were going sledding after the varsity basketball game. They left in Eric's old Jeep Cherokee with blankets, snacks, and a camcorder. Eric's little brother, Adam, later confirmed they mentioned a bonfire, somewhere different this time. That was the last anyone heard from them. By Monday, the panic had set in. A light snow had fallen over the weekend, covering any possible tracks. The Jeep was found on a service road deep in the woods, locked, undisturbed, with keys still in the ignition. Inside, authorities found their gear neatly packed, but the camcorder was missing. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints around the car, no evidence of where they'd gone. Then came the voicemails. At 3:14 a.m. on February 15th, Marie's mother received a call from her daughter's number. She answered to a line of silence, followed by what sounded like breathing, and then a faint voice whispering, "The hollow walks in silence." 3 other families received similar calls, random times, never more than 15 seconds long. One voicemail, traced to Josh's phone, contained layered audio, the rustle of leaves, the low static of wind, and someone sobbing. The final words recorded were chilling. "It's not dark here. It's empty." Authorities believed it was a cruel prank at first. But all the calls were traced to the victims' phones, and cell tower pings confirmed they originated from somewhere within the woods. A 2-week manhunt ensued. Bloodhounds picked up a trail 300 yards from the Jeep, only to lose it near a ravine. One dog refused to continue, howling and biting at its handler's leg. 3 weeks later, the first and only physical clue emerged. A boot, belonging to Kelsey Dover, was found perched atop a fence post at the forest's edge, 5 miles from the search zone. Inside were 10 human teeth, none belonging to the missing teens. DNA results were inconclusive, partially degraded, some of it never identified. The boot's laces were tied into a knot known as a hangman's loop. Conspiracies flooded the town. A reclusive off-grid community known as the Winter's Fold was rumored to occupy a stretch of the forest 20 miles north, but no proof was ever found. Old newspaper clippings from the 1940s mentioned several disappearances in the same area, always in February, always in groups of 4. In 2002, a hunter named Mike Verne spotted a tree in the woods with carvings spiraling up its trunk. When photographed, the images revealed hundreds of tally marks surrounding a central phrase carved repeatedly: "Don't answer it. Don't look back." Authorities couldn't find the tree when they returned. That same year, Eric's camcorder was mailed anonymously to the Winter Park Sheriff's Department. It was wrapped in cloth, tied with what appeared to be hair. The footage was heavily degraded, flickering frames and static overlaid most of the video, but 2 moments stood out. The first showed the group laughing around a bonfire. Marie jokes about hearing a voice from the woods. Eric turns to the camera and says, "It's probably just the Hollowman." The others laugh. The second segment was grainy, nearly black, but in the final 10 seconds, the camera zooms shakily toward a dark shape between the trees. It's tall, unmoving. Its head tilts slightly, and the footage ends. No further clues ever emerged. In 2011, a woman hiking with her dog in the same forest reported hearing voices calling her name, despite being alone. She fled and later told authorities the trees felt like they were closing in. She described hearing the same phrase as the voicemails, "The hollow walks in silence." The FBI officially closed the case in 2015 due to lack of evidence, but Winter Park residents still leave makeshift memorials near the trailhead each February. 4 crosses. 4 candles. No names spoken aloud. Some hikers say they still hear the murmurs. Some claim to see pale figures watching from the frost-covered trees. One child, hiking with his family in 2020, wandered off and was found repeating, "He doesn't like the noise," while drawing a tall black figure with no eyes. The Winter Park murmurs remain one of Minnesota's strangest unsolved cases, an eerie silence that continues to whisper through the trees each time the snow begins to fall. The Piano Room Killer. In the fall of 1971, Bellington, New Jersey, a quiet, blue-collar town known more for its textile mills than anything else, was shaken by a gruesome and theatrical murder that would give rise to one of the most chilling cold cases in state history. Locals called it the Piano Room Killing, but as the years passed and the body count rose, the whispers evolved into something darker: the Piano Room Killer. The first victim was Henry Walden, a beloved music teacher at Bellington High School. He was found on a rainy Monday morning, slumped over the grand piano in the school auditorium. His fingers had all been cleanly broken, each one dislocated and twisted at unnatural angles. A blood-stained metronome sat ticking steadily on the piano, as if keeping time with death itself. No blood trail, no forced entry, and no witnesses. The door was locked from the inside. On the blackboard, written in red ink, was a single phrase: "The tempo of guilt is always allegro." The town mourned. Henry had no known enemies, and his students described him as patient, kind, and quietly brilliant. Police suspected a disgruntled student, possibly an outsider with a grudge, but no leads stuck. Then, the story began to fade, until 4 years later, when another tragedy struck. Sofia Ramirez, one of Henry's former students, had gone on to become a music major at a nearby college. In 1975, she was found dead in the campus practice room, sitting at a piano bench with a snapped violin string tightly wound around her throat. The piano beside her played a single note on loop. Someone had rigged the key to remain depressed. On the wall was a Joker playing card with the eyes scratched out. The symbolism was unmistakable. Investigators made the connection immediately. Sofia had been a featured soloist in the final spring concert Henry ever conducted. The next victim came 3 years later. Then another in 1982. Each had once been a student of Henry Walden. Each died in a setting involving music. All had mutilated hands or necks. And in every case, a Joker card was left nearby, eyes scratched out, mouth drawn wider with red ink. Police interviewed dozens of former students, but one name kept resurfacing: Terrence Lake. He had been expelled a year before Henry's death after multiple reports of erratic behavior and obsession with a music teacher. Students remembered him as awkward, intense, and often sketching disturbing imagery in his music notebooks. When police attempted to bring him in for questioning in 1983, they found his car wrapped around a tree outside Newark. Terrence was dead, neck snapped on impact. Inside his glove box was a music composition notebook. The final page showed a crude drawing of a metronome with an eye inside it. Beneath it, the phrase, "Only the guilty hear the beat." Everyone assumed the case had finally ended with Terrence's death. The murders stopped for a while, the town exhaled, and the school reopened its once shuttered music wing. But in 1991, something horrifying shattered that illusion. Claire Redmond, the current Bellington High choir teacher, was found unconscious in the same auditorium where Henry had been murdered. She had been preparing for the winter recital and stayed late after school. The janitor found her lying on the stage, hands bound, mouth taped. She had a Joker card pinned to her chest. She survived. Claire later told authorities she had been lured by a cassette tape left in her mailbox. It was labeled, "For Your Ears Only." The tape was a piano recording, someone playing for Elise, slowly and deliberately, with a strange echoing sound beneath the melody. When she entered the auditorium that evening, she claimed the same melody began playing on the old piano by itself. She turned to leave but was struck from behind. She never saw her attacker's face, but she remembered the scent, metallic and old, like rust and mothballs, and a voice that whispered, "Let the tempo take you." Claire quit teaching and moved out of state soon after. No fingerprints, no fibers, no witnesses. Nothing but that card and the faint imprint of a metronome etched into the wood floor beside her. The FBI reopened the case, now considering the possibility that Terrence Lake hadn't been the killer after all, or worse, that someone else had taken up his legacy. In 2004, an anonymous tip was phoned into the local paper. A man claimed he had evidence related to the piano room murders. When reporters arrived at the designated meeting spot, a condemned opera house on the edge of town, they found no man, but there was a music box left on the stage. Inside, another joker card, and a cassette tape labeled Encore. The recording hasn't been released to the public, but insiders say it ends with the sound of a metronome, ticking faster and faster, until it suddenly stops. Since then, the case has gone cold again. But every few years, someone in Bellington reports hearing piano music echoing late at night through the empty halls of the school. A custodian claimed he once found a joker card resting on a piano key. The principal dismissed it as a student prank. Some say the killer was someone who blamed Henry Walden for something never made public. Others believe it was never Terrence at all, but a group, maybe a cult-like following of someone who used music as a language of pain. A code. To this day, the case remains unsolved. The music room is locked at night, and every new teacher is told, quietly and off the record, not to stay alone in the auditorium after dark, not to play the piano past midnight, and never, under any circumstance, to ignore the sound of a ticking metronome when no one else is around. Shadows in the grain. In the heart of rural Kansas lies a forgotten patch of farmland known as Graymire. It once belonged to the Bellamy family, who operated a modest grain mill and lived in a creaky, three-story farmhouse that had stood since the 1880s. By 1979, the property had changed hands several times, finally landing with the Dunwich Agricultural Co-op. But in 1981, after a series of eerie events and one devastating discovery, the land was abandoned, marked as cursed by some, avoided entirely by others. The horror began on June 2, 1981. Dale Hemsworth, a 39-year-old co-op technician, arrived to repair a silo gauge malfunction. He called in to confirm his arrival at 7:48 a.m. He never called again. By noon, his supervisor grew concerned and drove out to the Graymire lot. Dale's truck was still parked beside the grain elevator. The ignition was off. The driver's side door was open. Inside the truck were his thermos, clipboard, and a cassette radio still playing softly. A trail of disturbed dirt led to the silo, but no Dale. Sheriff's deputies arrived shortly after. When they opened the silo's maintenance hatch, they found something chilling. Not a body, but the word, "Listen," carved repeatedly into the metal interior. Beneath it, a work glove, Dale's, half buried in grain. Search teams combed the area for days. Nothing. No prints, no signs of a struggle. But then, a neighboring farmer reported something strange. A few nights before Dale vanished, he claimed he'd heard music coming from the silo. Organ music, low, slow, and drifting across the fields just before midnight. Initially dismissed as imagination, the report gained weight when another worker, Janelle Bishop, heard it too. She was locking up equipment one night when she caught the tune drifting on the wind, a distorted waltz melody echoing from inside the old Bellamy barn. That same barn was the next site of horror. 3 weeks after Dale's disappearance, 2 more employees, Raymond Holt and Travis McMillan, were assigned to clean and rewire the barn's electrical panel. At 2:17 p.m., Travis radioed in a panic. "Something's in the walls, we heard it moving. We're getting out." Neither man returned home. Police found the barn in shambles. The circuit box had been violently smashed. Raymond's flashlight lay broken in the hay, still on. A crude mural had been carved into one of the support beams, long-limbed, shadowy shapes rising from the grain fields like spirits. Above them, One word repeated over and over in jagged letters. Sewn. That night, someone broke into the Graymeyer farm office. Nothing was stolen, but a grainy security tape recorded a flickering shape near the window. It looked vaguely human, except for its lengthened limbs and unnatural gait. When authorities paused the tape at the 123 mark, they noted a face, white and featureless, pressed against the glass for a single frame. At this point, the case became national news. The FBI was called in, and the remaining staff at Graymeyer were placed on administrative leave. Drone footage showed deep, symmetrical furrows in the surrounding wheat fields, like crop circles, only narrower and overlapping chaotically. The soil beneath the disturbed areas tested normal. No radiation. No chemicals. And yet, the field cameras picked up movement when no one was present. Then came the discovery in the grain elevator. On August 4th, nearly 2 months after the first disappearance, a silo technician, one of the few who dared return, noticed something odd in the reserve chute, a slow, rhythmic clinking noise. When he investigated, he found an old tin lunchbox resting on the grain. Inside were 3 human teeth, a rusted music box, and a folded piece of paper that read, "The harvest is not yours." The music box played the same distorted melody others had reported, slowed organ music, broken into fragments. FBI audio technicians determined the tune resembled a 19th-century funeral march, though no exact match could be found. The case went cold after that. No more disappearances. No new evidence. Just rumors and silence. But in 1995, a group of amateur paranormal investigators ventured into the Graymeyer property. They live-streamed from inside the barn for nearly 45 minutes, laughing, exploring, finding nothing. Then, just before the stream cut out, one of them panned across the grain fields. A figure stood motionless near the furrows. Slender. Tall. No features. The video ends with static. 3 of the group were later found wandering 5 miles east, barefoot and in shock. They couldn't explain what had happened. The 4th, a woman named Alyssa Gray, was never found. Locals today refer to the Graymeyer entity only as the sower. Legend says it feeds on guilt, that it grows in places of buried secrets and old grief. Some believe the Bellamy family, the land's original owners, practiced a ritualistic form of agriculture, planting more than just seeds. In 2008, a letter surfaced at the Bellington Sheriff's Office. No return address. Inside was a photograph of the Graymeyer silo under moonlight, with what appeared to be dozens of shadowy figures kneeling around it in rows. The back of the photo read, "Reap what they sowed." No one knows who sent it. No remains were ever discovered. The Graymeyer murders remain one of the most unsettling, unsolved cases in Kansas history. The land was eventually sold to the state, which fenced it off and declared it restricted farmland due to unstable soil. But sometimes, on still nights, truckers passing on Route 58 say they see lights deep in the field, and hear a faint tune drifting through the wheat, slow and sweet as a lullaby. The Glass Harbor vanishings. Glass Harbor was once a sleepy fishing village on the coast of Maine, wrapped in fog and folklore. It had fewer than 800 residents, a single inn, and an aging lighthouse that hadn't been lit since 1972. But in the summer of 1993, a string of bizarre disappearances turned the town into a whispered legend, one that investigators still can't explain. It began on July 3rd, when a tourist named Brendan Clark vanished during a morning walk along the shoreline. His fiancée, Kelly Raymond, said he'd gone to photograph the tide pools near the rocks by Devil's Point, a jagged cliff that overlooked the ocean. He never returned. The tide was low when search teams arrived. Brendan's footprints led right to the edge of the rocks, and stopped. No signs of a fall, no blood, no equipment. His camera bag was found near the base of the old lighthouse, zipped and dry, containing nothing but an empty roll of film and a small note with the words, "She speaks in mirrors." Locals were uneasy. There had always been stories about that part of the coast. Old fishermen told tales of the Mirror Sea, a superstition claiming that, on certain nights, the ocean's surface would become unnaturally still, like glass, and show not just reflections, but visions. It was said that to stare too long was to invite something through. 1 week later, a second tourist disappeared. Maya Delacroix, an amateur artist from Providence, was last seen sketching the coastline from her balcony at the Harborview Inn. Her final drawing, found on the floor beside an overturned glass of wine, showed a distorted woman standing waist-deep in the ocean, arms outstretched. The woman's face was not visible, just a smear of charcoal. Written along the border of the page were the words, "Not a reflection, a reply." Authorities dismissed it as coincidence, 2 missing persons in a town where the sea had claimed many before. But things escalated on July 18th. 3 local teens, Dylan, Marcy, and Luis, decided to sneak into the abandoned lighthouse on a dare. The story goes that Marcy went in first while the boys stayed behind to record with a camcorder. Inside, she climbed the spiral stairs and stood facing the lighthouse lens, which was still mostly intact despite years of weathering. She turned back and waved to the camera. Then, in a moment caught on film, her smile dropped. She froze, then stepped backward, out of frame, out of sight. When the boys entered seconds later, she was gone. They searched the whole structure, shouting her name, but the tower was empty. Police reviewed the footage. Marcy can be seen waving, then stopping suddenly. Just before she steps away, the glass lens behind her flickers, not with light, but movement. A blur, a shadow. Then she vanishes. Her reflection remains visible for 1/2 second longer than her body. Locals began locking their doors. Tourists left early. The sheriff's office closed access to the lighthouse and Devil's Point. But the disappearances didn't stop. A fisherman named Elias Corbin, one of the oldest residents in Glass Harbor, was the next to go. He left a note on his kitchen table. "It's not the sea that takes them. It's what sees them." His boat was found drifting aimlessly 2 miles offshore. On board was a cracked hand mirror tied to the steering wheel with fishing twine. The mirror's surface was fogged, but when investigators cleaned it, they found 5 faint fingerprints, each the size of a child's. None matched Elias. By August, the town was in full panic. Officials brought in marine divers, sonar scans, and even psychological profilers. Nothing made sense. The last disappearance occurred on August 12th. That one was caught, partially, on security footage. The Harborview Inn had installed cameras in the hallways after Maya's vanishing. At 3:41 a.m., footage showed an elderly guest, June Atwater, walking in her nightgown toward the exit. Her gait was slow, trance-like. Just as she reached the front door, she paused. The camera glitched briefly, and in a flicker of frames, a second figure appeared in the reflection of the glass door. The shape was tall, with long, wet hair obscuring its face. When the footage resumed, June was gone. The door had never opened. She was never found. After that, the town all but collapsed. The inn shut down. Homes were boarded up. Tourists stopped coming. By 1995, fewer than 300 residents remained, and most refused to speak of that summer. The lighthouse was demolished later that year, though no official reason was given. Some say it was a safety hazard. Others say the town couldn't bear to look at it anymore. But the strangest part of the Glass Harbor vanishings came 10 years later. In 2003, a hiker exploring the coastline discovered a sealed glass bottle buried beneath the sand. Inside was a piece of faded parchment, dated August 13, 1993, just 1 day after the final disappearance. The handwriting matched Brendan Clark's, the very first victim. The letter read, "It shows you what you want most. That's how it gets close. The face in the water is never yours. Don't follow the echo. Don't look into the tide." No fingerprints were found on the bottle. The glass was decades old. The message, however, was ruled authentic. To this day, Glass Harbor remains largely uninhabited. Nature has reclaimed much of it. Occasionally, urban explorers post online about finding old belongings left behind, half-drawn sketches, hand mirrors, broken video cameras with ruined tapes. Some claim to hear faint music near the shore. Others speak of seeing someone watching from the water, waiting for their gaze. No bodies were ever recovered. No suspects were ever identified. And no answers were ever found.